Hi friends, welcome to episode 54. The weather is very odd this weekend. Today is Sunday. I was up here yesterday, Saturday, and it was minus something or other out there. It was freezing cold out there. Everything was frozen. And in here I had even the bucket of water that's over the other side that I use was frozen as well. So it was a really cold day. Although now it's not too bad. It's about 3 degrees. However, it snowed overnight. And now it's pouring with rain. So it's going to be an odd day today, but it is going to warm up about lunchtime. It's going to become about 12 degrees, which is quite warm for this time of year. Anyway, moving on with the RT. I made a start yesterday on the beading that we took out. You might remember my brother came down just before Christmas. We fitted the ceiling. We've got everything all lined up correctly, and now I've got to take it all back out. And with help of Mark Davis the other week, we removed all the bits and pieces. So I've now got, just over the other side of the shed, which you can't see, a certain amount of beading, which I rubbed down yesterday and put the first coat of paint on it. So I plan to put another coat on today if I can, if the weather holds up okay. So I'll put a second coat of primer on it. So there's a few other little jobs to do as well. I'm going to make a start on removing the paint from the grills that went at the front of the RT, just at the roof line there, and a few other little bits and pieces which I need to get going on. So anyway, it's freezing cold here-ish. So let's see how we get on this edition.
Right, this is the weather that greeted me on Saturday morning. It was freezing cold at the barn, maybe minus something or other as I was driving up there. But the weather was going to be so changeable over the weekend, very odd indeed. The problem with it being this cold is it's not good to paint in. I know I've said this before, it becomes damp. And the damp was going to become an issue later on in the weekend. But anyway, having stripped out the beading the previous week, I really wanted to get started on that. So one of the first things I did on Saturday morning was make this little template, which is currently sitting inside my little mini pillar drill. The purpose of the template, and I've got a similar one as well for the metal beading that goes on the outside of the RT. And the purpose of that is once you've set it up and you put it in the drill, all of those holes will be dead centre, providing you've got it right. The other thing is you can just about see those little black marks I've got that run across it. They're markers so that each hole is the same distance across the beading. Only problem is some of the bits of beading, they came off like this as well as those that Darryl made, was slightly different lengths as well for some reason, but they allowed quite a bit of tolerance in them days. So that's the purpose of this little thing, is just to drill the holes, and then I needed to come back later on and do a little bit of countersinking with a slightly different drill bit. Meanwhile, with the ceiling down, it gave me the ideal opportunity to get my laser out. What this is I'm finding where the blocks are. Now, once the ceiling's up, you can't see these blocks. There's a small number of them, and what they are is at the top of the seat frame, you have a little rosette that's held in with 4 wood screws. Now, those rosettes have got to go in the right place. Now, the seat frame, if you just put the seat frame in there, I was chatting with Darryl about it. I said the problem is the seat frame is not a very good indicator to where these little blocks are behind the panel, because the seat frames are often slightly distorted and will have a habit of going where they want to go, and you could end up drilling holes in the ceiling and then finding out you've got nothing to support the seat frame or the top of the seat, the actual pole itself. Now, there are some others as well. You've got these other 2 which sit either side of the bench seats, and what they do is they hold that pole. You see that little straight pole that sits just above the bench seat, so when you're getting up you grab hold of it. So that's what those 2 do. Right, so the purposes of the laser line is I can make a mark either end of the saloon on a little piece of tape, draw it on a pencil or whatever, make that mark, and then I know that when the ceiling is up, I can then replicate it with the laser line. Now, there's also laser lines that go sort of left to right as well as along the entire saloon of the bus. And simply by triangulating those, I should be able to work out where these blocks are once they're back hidden in the ceiling. So I've used the laser quite a bit actually with the beading on the outside of the bus. You'll be surprised. The beading on the near side, which is original, I haven't touched it, it's all over the place. And I pointed that out to a few people. Basically you can measure, measure it every 5 foot or so, and the actual distance of the beading between each bit of beading varies so dramatically, but you never notice it because it's quite tiny, and they were allowed to do that. So anyway, I don't want to make a mistake. So once this ceiling is back in, I need to know where these are. So the laser line, once that's then the panels are back in, I'll then level it up with the marks I've made each end of the saloon, and also those that I've made on the bits that are not part of the ceiling, i.e. where the light pans go. And once that's done, hopefully I'll get those panels back in without any problems. Right, before we leave the interior ceiling, I've got some little bits to do. And in these little silver sort of crevices that you see there, in there sits a little ventilator, a grill. And it's really quite pretty actually, and it's all part of the styling of the RT. Now the purpose for that is to let fresh air in to the lower deck saloons if you didn't need enough air being let in, because you've got this lovely window here on the near side as well. That's one good thing about RTs. A huge number of opening windows. Not very good with heaters, I point out. Certainly not in the beginning when they weren't built with them. But anyway, this lovely little ventilator goes in that space. So I needed to get the paint stripper out. Having found them on the upper deck where I stored them 25 years ago, I had to get the paint stripper out on Saturday, put some paint stripper on it, leave it overnight, and then come in the morning. And this is what I was presented with. Right, so the paint stripper had sort of started to do its job, but really hadn't made a lot of progress on the paint, and it's probably the cold might have affected it. I had a look at the instructions on it. You know, like you get something out of a box and you just use it and you don't even bother to look at the instructions. It actually said don't use at temperature below +10, and I think it was about -3 or 4 overnight. So the paint stripper really didn't have a good chance to get at this. But anyway, the top two are the two grills. The one on the top is the near side, I think, yes, and the one on the bottom is the off side. And they are made of solid brass. I mean, another part of the RT that when you strip it down, you find out what craftsmanship went into making these vehicles. I mean, totally these days completely impractical. You just would never bother with that. Just was an old plastic grill at the front of the bus. But you know, absolutely beautiful workmanship that went into these things. Now the little sort of rectangular thing just below them, that houses the saloon blind. Now there was a blind on the near side window, which was designed to stop reflections into the driver's cab. I think a bit pointless, frankly. But nonetheless, there was a lovely little blind fitted in there, and I'm not going to paint strip all of that. I've simply rubbed that down, and then when I get the pot of paint out, I'll paint that in the cream. That cream in there is the original cream, by the way. I know we had a lot of fussing around to try and get the right colour. If you look at that, those two panels above, they are in probably what is that broken white that we were talking about, and everyone's gone, no, don't use that colour, Dean. But just below, as you can see, that I think is the original cream. So we're going to go with that anyway. As you might have seen from some of the light panels, have already been painted in that colour. So we'll move on. Right, so I had to give it another tickle with the paint stripper. So here I am sticking some paint stripper on it. You have to leave it for a bit, and then next thing you do is get out either a scraper or the wire brush. I use the electric wire brush these days because it does quite well, especially as there's so many little intricate bits to sort of get cleaned out. So it really was, it was an interesting little project, but the end result was absolutely beautiful. Right, so this is the end result, a beautiful lump of brass. And this is what it used to look like before I got the paint stripper on it. It'd be an absolute shame to put paint on that, isn't it? But it has to be done. So I'll put a primer coat on there when I get a moment, and then that will be sprayed in the cream colour that we're going to do the whole ceiling in. Okay, you might recall earlier on in this video, this piece of beading falling down. These are the bits of beading my brother put in the bus the other day, just before Christmas, and I needed to remove them to get them out and pop some paint on them. Well, here they are. Last thing Saturday night, I put a coat of paint on them, and then on Sunday morning when I got back, it dried off quite neatly. So I was able to put a second coat of paint on them. So pleased that little job's done. It's going to have to be, there's more coats of paint will go on it because I'm going to put another coat of undercoat, and then a couple of coats probably of top coat before I pop them back into the bus. Right, these are two bits of wood I'm really pleased I found. As you may notice, by the various shades of green and yellow and white and all the other bits and pieces, that one sits above the platform, and Daryl and I were fussing just before Christmas as to how we were going to replace that piece of wood. Now, I'm not entirely sure if it's complete because it may have a bit broken off one end, but we were considering making it in aluminium. Wash my mouth out after that. I know some people who've restored their buses have used aluminium strips inside. And fully understandable, can't blame you, because the actual aluminium strips on the outside are very similar in size to these bits of wooden beading. And a good thing about aluminium is you can actually, with a bit of effort, twist it, which obviously you can't do with wood. Well, I suppose someone will say you could if you steamed it, but hey-ho. So anyway, this bit was right on the corner, and we were really fussing over this because of its radius. So, really pleased. Sorting through some boxes, I found that one. The one slightly above it that looks really like it's had a hard life, that's just by the staircase inside and just by where the sort of the conductor's area is. So, I think I managed to salvage that. So, on Sunday, the very last thing I did was pop some paint stripper on them. So, hopefully on Saturday, by the time I've got up there next weekend, all that paint will have lifted, or at least be halfway, having got rid of it. So, that's one little job that's underway. Right, okay, what's this funny thing? Well, you've probably seen these, but you probably haven't recognised it. What this is the little turny handle thing that sits over the platform. There's the remains of the ceiling in there as well. Look what a state that was in. So anyway, so I'm going to have to dismantle all of this and remove all that manky wood that's sitting there. Paint strip that little rosette thing that it's attached to. Clean it all up, and that'll make that look like new by the time I've finished. But that's the thing that you use to turn the side blind. So, another little job. That's going to be like half a day, I think, on that, frankly. Okay, sticking in the same area, I wanted to get the paint off of here. The reason is when I managed to get the ceiling back in, I don't want to sort of, like I say, damage the new ceiling by trying to take paint off the outside of the bus. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make a margin, remove all the paint that's on those edges so that's all nice and clean and out the way, and that way in future when I get the orbital sander out or the paint stripper or whatever, the new ceiling won't be affected. I'm also going to try and paint just inside, because just inside that edge just above my head is actually green. You can see where the platform side panel goes up, where the heater switches are and the bell push and everything, and that's green. So I'm going to have to take some of the green off of that as well. The whole lot's got to be painted anyway. But so here I am with a paint scraper, scraping off paint. What an exciting little project. And that little bit of metal I showed you earlier, that little windy thing, sits just above my head, and that changes the number. Right, okay, changing the subject completely, going from inside the bus to under the bus. I do hate having to redo jobs. Unfortunately, when I did the footage the other day of me changing the oil, one of the things we discovered, and a lot of very wise people, Roy Gould, Brian Watkinson, the guy that I've taken the injectors to, have all said, get that oil out that you've put in there and basically clean out the oil strainer. Now the oil strainer is that thing that sits just to the edge of my hand there. You see that ring of bolts. But obviously in order to, there you go. Do you know what? Last time I really flooded the floor with this oil. And unfortunately I spent about an hour on Sunday evening cleaning the floor up because it just doesn't work. There's 25 litres of oil in there, and I got the secondary can. That secondary can that I'm pulling over, I shoved that. I pulled this one out of the way before it overfilled, and then I discovered after about an hour or so that the secondary can had a hole in it, and so all the stuff that had gone in there afterwards, I might as well not bothered. So yeah, it made the floor so much worse. So anyway, what I'm going to have to do now is, you can see what I mean. Look, see the amount of oil I got on the floor. That's going to be half a day cleaning that up, I'm afraid. But anyway, so once that's all out, I shall, and it's as dry as a bone underneath there, I've got all the oil out of the way, I shall then remove those bolts on that little sort of base plate you see just at the bottom of the sump, and have a look and see what that looks like in there, because that is the oil strainer, and it gathers up all the muck that's at the bottom. Now, I am of the view, and the guy that did the injectors, the very first thing he said to me, he said, "Oh, have you done an oil change?" And I said, "Yeah, I have actually." I don't know what that's got to do with injectors, frankly, but anyway, in fairness, he really knows his stuff. And he said, was the oil very heavy, and is it sort of quite thick? And I said, yeah, it was. I said, initially it was as thick as anything. It came out like ice cream. And he said, yeah, expect that, but you'll need to clean the oil strainer before you put these injectors back in. He's also suggested that I fill each of the 6 bores up with about half a cup of oil and diesel in order to act as a lubricant for when the engine turns over. I've already manually turned this over several times, as I think some of you might be aware from sort of previous footage, but I have, there's no injectors in it now, so what the plan is that we'll change this oil. I have to get rid of this, and a whole load of new oil will have to go in it once I've done the oil strainer, and I will then crank the engine over without the injectors in, so we get a good few turns on it. We're just on the starter motor, and then we'll reinstall the injectors and see how we get on. So anyway, that was a little project, but I really do hate having to go back over all this stuff a second time. I will, of course, film all of this as we put this engine back together again. And I am very wary about taking too much of it apart, because I really don't want to be disturbing it, but I accept that we're going to have to do this, because if we don't, and the oil is so thick that it can't get through to the rockers and the valves and everything, it will basically wreck the engine. So this is a must do. But like I said, I will film it all and we'll see how we get on. But like anything, it's going to push back my attempts to get this started up. I really had hoped in my sort of my mind diary that I was going to be able to do it in January, but I really don't think. It's probably going to be February, March now, probably March at maybe February, March at the latest. But there we are. Anyway, so let's move on then. I'll throw this in here while I've got the chance. This is the view of outside the barn on Sunday morning, just after it had snowed. And it was at that point probably about -1, -2. The day warmed up, but there was a rather irritating phenomena as the day warmed up, and that was this. What you're looking at is not bobbly paint or bits of lumps of whatever in paint. That is condensation, and this is the upper deck near side pillar on the RT. I'd clambered up on the ladder to remove some masking paper that I put on there. Oh, donkey's back. Now, when I paint strip these corner pillars, and I've just noticed there is a dent. That's one of the reasons why I like painting these, because then you can actually see things. So anyway, moving on. So when I paint strip these pillars, because they are metal, not aluminium, they would rust. And this is a very good example of the reason why I put that paint on there, because people say, well, why don't you just leave it as it is and just leave it metal, and then, send it off to a chap who's going to repaint it and he'll do all of it for you. The problem is the time it takes, and with all these changes in weather, this is going to start to rust. And there's a lot more work getting rid of the surface rust than would be just nibbing this down with a bit of wet and dry, or with the orbital sander or something. Oh, actually, probably orbital sander a bit hard on that. But yeah, just nibbing it down with a bit of wet and dry. So that explains why. And here, if you want any evidence that it's not something that I've actually stage managed, here is the evidence that it is actually just water. Right, now for something entirely different, moving upstairs to the nice and warm. This was before I took all that masking off the outside windows. As you can see, it's well, that's that sort of that paper on the window. But anyway, I removed all of that. So, having got the lights to work upstairs, I needed to put one panel back, and that was the little mirror just above the stairs. And that was because that was a good access point for the cables that ran up to the lamp, and also the cable that ran to the buzzer. I admit I have cheated very much slightly with this, because from the left of shot where those light bulbs are, that's still the original heritage wiring in there. But I managed to have a good look in through here, through that space, and the heritage wiring in that conduit was actually in really good condition. It was the stuff that was downstairs that was absolutely terrible. But although there was never a join behind that lamp, in fact behind that mirror rather, I've created one. So there are 4 cables there, negative, positive, near side, off side, and there was another 2 cables for the buzzer. Now the buzzer I've rewired completely, because I was able to pull that through to where the little buzzer aperture is. But this, the lighting obviously would have been a much more difficult job, and had to remove all the those panels and everything inside. And I thought, no, it's probably not worth it for very little gain, a hell of a lot of effort. Anyway, the only thing I have done with this mirror is I replaced all the wood screws. I replaced them actually about 30 odd years ago when I previously did it. And they are not, the sort of purists amongst you will point out that they were never stainless steel on the edges. They were always painted. But I think it looks quite pretty like that. So anyway, so that's pushing that thing back into the bus. And that then means all I need to do now, having got it back in the bus, is to give it a quick clean. Yeah, looking at that now, I didn't do a particularly good job of that Rexine back in the 1980s, early 90s when I did that, and I got a few little clip bits missing. Just to the right to that, or to the left of shot, right on the edge left of shot, is a little bit of beading, and that should go over that bit directly below the mirror. So there's another bit there, and that bit on the corner looks a bit wonky, so I may have to sort that out at some point in the future, but they're jobs for another day. This is about as far as I got upstairs when I did it back in the 80s, early 90s. I got to about this point and then stopped, and then went outside and did the outside, and it was part of juggling it with the weather, because on the inside you can heat it up with a little fan heater, and on the outside obviously you need a damn big fan heater, and I wouldn't really recommend it. The barn is far too big. The other thing that happened on Sunday, as it warmed up, I thought I had a leak on the ceiling in the barn, because all I could hear was drip, 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 drip. And what it was where the condensation had turned to ice on the roof inside the barn. As it started to thaw out, it was dripping down onto the buses. So I kept hearing this sort of, sounded like it was raining in the barn. But anyway, right, so that is definitely a wrap on this. I'll finish off with some of the footage that I did on Saturday morning, showing the frozen fields and the frozen drive there. So thanks very much for watching. That's a wrap on this edition. I'm going to be up the barn again, I'm sure, this weekend. Hopefully I'll be able to paint those large roof sections, because I'm hoping the paint will come in, the primer or undercoat will come in for those. I've also ordered up some more paint for the actual top coat, that cream. So and then I've got to rub all the panels back down again, all those lamp panels that we had in there, the bulkhead. I've got to put some paint on that little grill thing at the front. I've got to repair that. Blimey, the list is absolutely endless. So if you do want to buy an RT, friends, just bear in mind there's a lot of work involved in one, but it is really satisfying. So anyway, thank you very much for joining me. I'll see you next time. Cheers. Bye.